America and Europe, because there are countries like Brazil, in which, after all, I mean, the economic depressions since 1980 have been up and down, but I mean, it's suffered to an extent which people over here can't remember.
You've already seen it, in other words.
You've already seen it. You're already in it at this very moment in a Great Depression. But if people forget about the 80% who live in the South, or in the Third World, then of course they can say, ah, well, I believe that this particular policy, what Joe Stiglitz, the Nobel Prize man, called the Washington Consensus, and what other people call market fundamentalism, that this is now going to come to an end because it has patently failed, particularly in the last 3 or 4 years. And I think insofar as we return to a policy, including an international policy, of a mixed economy in which the state has some input and controls the excesses, the natural, logical excesses, the inevitable excesses of a free market, then there will be greater scope for the third world economies.
In one of your recent books, On the Edge of the New Century, you end with the observation that you cannot look to the future with great optimism. What do you fear most?
I fear, I think, most the gradual weakening of the state. It seems to me that over the past 30 years, in many ways, the degree of law and order, the control of governments over what happens in their territories, has been seriously undermined. I think it was about 1970 that the Association of British Chiefs of Police told the government that they could no longer guarantee the degree of public order that had been assumed as normal earlier on. Look at the situation, even, I'm taking Great Britain, because it is a peaceful and stable thing. For almost 30 years, we have lived in a situation of semi-civil war with private forces, armed forces operating, mostly in Northern Ireland, but also to some extent on the British territories, you see. Huh? And we have been unable to eliminate this completely. I think this tendency is happening in all countries, even in the United States. I think in many parts of the world, it has actually led to a virtual disintegration of the state, public law, public order. In Latin America, for instance, it would be hard to think that the Colombian government has serious control of what happens on its territory. Whoever has control, I mean, that is a situation which is really comparatively new. Although in the beginning, in whatever it is, in the early 19th century, it was quite common in Latin America, but after a while it was gradually eliminated.
The nation-state losing control of its...
The nation-state loses. And that, I think, in a sense, produces a degree of insecurity and also, of course, a greater degree of violence. There's that. The second thing that I'm afraid of is the enormous growth in social inequality, which has taken place, again, over the past 20, 30 years. While it is perfectly true that on the whole, most people in the world have got better off. They live longer and they live better and so on over the 20th century. In actual fact, a certain degree of inequality, of social inequality, and the tensions of this inequality are dangerous. Look at your own country. The first thing that any foreigner notices about Brazil is the extraordinary social inequality and economic inequality. I believe that particularly the last 20, 30 years, which has been globalization under the sign of complete lack of control, free market, complete free market, has produced not only inequality but also enormous instability. Rapid booms, dramatic slumps, and transformations of unpredicted and rapid. And this also has, it seems to me, creates even greater instability. Now, what makes me afraid is that the people who are likely to benefit from this instability politically are the reactionaries. Xenophobia, racism, economic and particularly religious fundamentalism, which is rising in all major religions. I fear that the cause of reason and progress and improvement, for which all of us stood in different ways, whether as liberals or socialists or communists or whatnot, is now being weakened. And that is what, in a sense, I look forward, therefore, if anything, to a political advance of the people who created enormous tragedies in the 20th century. It won't be fascism, but it will be the same sort of family of ultra right-wing nationalist or fundamentalist things. That is enough to be afraid of.
You've been talking about the machinery of capitalism, and of course, a great student of that was Karl Marx,
yes,
who has become kind of fashionable again in many ways. But do you think this new admiration for Marx has got more to do with his skills for diagnosis or his skills as prescriptions to destroy the capitalist system?
With his skills for diagnosis. I mean, the reason why I think Marx has become fashionable again and why even capitalists find themselves saying, hey, that man had something, is because he was the first man who predicted the sheer uncontrollable dynamics of capitalist development. You know, in the famous early phrases of the Communist Manifesto, you see. I think his prescriptions have turned out not to be either practical. He didn't actually have very concrete prescriptions. But I think the fact that even businessmen are now saying, hey, this man Marx, he had something, is a sign of the weakness of, or if you like, of the crisis in which capitalism is. This is a crisis of transition. We are going somewhere. The idea of a world globalization based on nothing except a pure, uncontrolled, laissez-faire free market isn't working and hasn't worked, and that is why people get worried about it again. I'm not worried about it, but what I am worried about is the potential solutions which may be found for it politically.
We've discussed capitalist systems, socialist systems, and all these social and economic conflicts that lead to war, to go back to our initial topic. Do you also believe, you're a student of social affairs and history, but you also believe that there's something inherently evil in man that leads to wars, leads to conflict?
Man is what he is, Whether you say it's good or bad are things, you know, as it were, subjective judgments. It would surprise me if human beings weren't capable of enormous goodness, because this has been demonstrated historically. It would not surprise me to find that men are capable of extraordinary evil, because that also has been demonstrated. I think morality isn't really a good guide. I think it is important, and it's the point in which I try to conclude my autobiography. I'm pessimistic, but in a sense, the world will not get better if we don't try and fight for a better world. We must not disarm. There is enough injustice that needs to be remedied. And even though we will never succeed in eliminating all of it, if we don't try, we are not properly human. We do not realize the potential of what being human is. That at least is my personal belief.
Thank you very much. That was
Okay.
enlightening.